So network automation has been a very hot topic in the industry for many years now. And yet, it feels like we have very little information about what people are actually doing, what tools they are using, what operations are actually automating, and why not, and how all of that is moving. If I ask you, you're probably going to tell me that people are using Ansible and they're using Python, but beyond that, we have very, very little information. And that was the whole idea behind this project, the Netdevops Survey that we're going to talk about today. And using the result that we got from the survey, and using my own experience in industry, I will try to give you my own perspective on what is the state of network operation through automation today. A little bit of background about myself. So I personally been involved in the network automation community for about 8 years now. I used to work for Juniper. I was talking with a lot of being involved on building some of the tools on the vendor side. Then I moved to the customer side more as a consumer. And today I'm working with Network to Code. So we're a consulting company specialized in network automation. So we're working with a lot of Fortune 500 to help them build automation. So the agenda is really actually organized on how the survey was organized. So first we're going to talk about introduction, talk about the data, where the data is coming from, who answered the survey, some information like that. Then we're going to go into the main part. It's like, what are actually people doing in terms of automations, what tools they are using. Then we had an interesting section in the survey this year, which was about how are people actually transitioning into network automation. And then a section about the trend. What are we thinking about for tomorrow? What is getting a lot of attention right now? And to close, I would like to give you more information about the project itself, the Netdevops Survey, and how it is working. So first, high level about the survey. The whole idea, when we started that a few years ago as a Juniper, is like we had very little information. We're all doing a lot of open source, and we're like, why don't we start a survey that works like an open source project? Why don't we start something that is community-driven, vendor neutral, and anonymous, where everybody get together to put together the questions, everybody get together to promote, and then we all get the results. And everybody can, based on that, actually draw their own analysis. And that's, at the time I was working at Juniper, I reached out to a lot of my colleagues at the times that were working for Cumulus and Cisco and Arista. We came together and we created that. And so right now we have two sets of results. We actually did the first survey in 2016. We had 20 people, contributors, actually contributing and helping build the questionnaires. We ended up having 300 participants that actually provided some input. And we did the same in 2019. One of the goals was to actually try to have the same set of questions to be able to compare and have some idea of how things have evolved between 16 and 19. If you're wondering what happened between 2016 and 2019, very simple. It is a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. It's always been a side project that everybody was doing on top of their main job, and none of us really had time to do that between 16 and 19. And to be fair, and very ironically, this survey was very manual in 2016. It took a lot of work to actually process all the results, clean up everything, and that was just too much. When we decided to do it again in 2019, we really decided that if we were going to do that one more time, we will this time invest on the tooling. And we did that. And you will see that there's a lot of things. So now we actually have a lot of automation and tooling around that make me way more confident that we'll be able to do the same in 2020, 2021, and all the years forward. So who are the people that actually answer to this survey? And really the target has been people that are operating networks and are already using some level of automation. So for example, myself, both times when we ran this survey, I was not in a position where I was operating a network myself. So I never actually filled this survey myself because I'm not the target. The target is people that are operating network using automation. When we see the size of the network that the participants are actually operating, we see a really good distributions between very small network, very high network. We see that they're coming all the way from mostly in America, North America, and Europe. We probably have underrepresentation in Asia, which in my perspective is probably due to the fact that we were using social media to promote the survey. So it's something we'd like to improve in the future, but our own social media circles are mostly around Europe and America right now. When we ask the questions about what type of environments are you managing, so we see good distributions around data center, campus, access, WAN, peering, which is in line with what we're seeing. Just like to highlight that some of the responses in this survey, they're actually multi-choice responses. So people, of course, in this case, most people don't manage single environments. So if you look at the top of the graph, you're actually seeing there's this stats 3.09 average, max 6. What that indicates is the average number of responses we're getting for this specific question. So on average, people are managing a little over 3 different types of environment. Now, if we compare that to 2016, and what you're seeing here is 2016 in green and 2019 in yellow, it's interesting to see that there's definitely being a really big increase in terms of a network engineer managing public cloud environments, and we're actually starting to see even a decrease in terms of network engineer managing data center environment, very much in line with I think we're all seeing in the industry. We also have some information about vendors. We're not really using that yet, but the idea is that at some point we'll be able to analyze all the questions and all what people are doing in terms of automation based on what vendor they're using. But I'd like to use these slides to highlight some important information. So the first one is in these editions, we didn't really, we were focusing mostly about router and switches. We didn't really have a lot of answers that will actually opening up the door for security. And yet, because we had this feel about where anybody could basically provide their own options, like the open field in most of the questions, we saw a lot of response around security. It was really a good signal to tell us that the next editions we need to do better in terms of security and had more security things, but that was not part of the main 2 editions. Another thing that I would like to discuss is probably you're seeing on this slide, there's a lot of information. There's a lot of things that are actually written in a pretty small way. And I'm gonna use a lot of those graphs along the presentation. I'll say, please don't try to go super deep into those slides because otherwise you won't be able to follow everything. Absolutely every graph is available online. You will get the presentation. You will have everything is shared. And really, I will speak to the graphs. So if you're in the back of the room and you're not able to read those graphs, it's actually even probably better because you won't be tempted to just try it and go deep on them. So what are actually people doing in terms of automation? And the first question was, what operations in your networks are currently automated? And we provided a list of 13 use cases that we thought were good representations, anywhere from configuration deployment, configuration generation, configuration archiving, software upgrade, software qualification, troubleshooting, zero-day provisioning. And the question was, among all of those tasks, which one is automated? And the response that we got was that more than 60% of the participants have already tackled configuration, either generations, deployment. And we see these numbers really go down when it comes to that compliance check, pre and post checks, and all the way at the bottom, we're seeing anomaly detections and fault remediations, which is very interesting. For me, a little thing that was a little surprising is troubleshooting. I personally see that troubleshooting is actually a very good use case to get started into automation because it doesn't require to change the network. It's very zero risk type of use case. And I was actually very surprised to see that only 20% of the participants are actually doing that. What's interesting is when we start to compare that with 2016. So here, again, 16 in green, 19 in yellow, we're seeing that in terms of configuration management, the percentage of participants doing that remained pretty flat, but we're seeing pretty big increase in terms of compliance checked, pre and post check, and at the bottom also software qualification. So very interesting to see how when the big organization and the big Fortune 500s gets really started into automation, and that's what we're seeing as well at Network to Code, is they really come at it from the compliance point of view, security check and all of that. So that was some interesting results. Now, and I actually forgot to highlight here, on average on these questions, people responded, selected 4.75 answers, meaning on average people are automating 4 or 5 of those tasks. And so it was very interesting to try to see and understand how the distribution is actually happening. Like if we're actually looking at how many responses did we got per participant for each of them, and again, if we're looking at comparing 16 with 19, we're seeing that there's definitely a larger number of people that are automating more than 5 tasks, 6, 7, 8. That basically tells us that there's part of the market that's really getting more mature and is doing more advanced things in the industry. So it's an interesting perspective to look at. Now, when we had all of those data, we then tried to go deeper into each of those areas and try to understand what tools are people actually using for that. And I won't be able to cover all of them during this presentation, but you have all the information available online. But so the question was, for example, what solutions are you using for the generations and deployment of your configuration? And the response that we got is that 60% of the people are using either Ansible or scripting. And scripting is actually split in 2 lines here, but if we put them together, the second and the third, you actually get pretty much 60% as well. Very interesting to see that Nornir and SoulStack, 2 open source projects that have been pushed mostly by individuals, really there's not a lot of cooperation behind them, are close to or over 10% of, mentioned in 10% of the responses. So it's been a really good information and signal. Another information that I found interesting on this slide is that on average, people selected more than 2 responses. The average is at 2.13, meaning everybody that's actually using Ansible is also using something else, most of them. And so I wanted to go deeper and I look at what are people that responded Ansible also provided as a response. And what we're seeing here, for example, is that 12% of the people that use Ansible are also using Nornir. And to be honest, I can't really explain that right now, but it gave me a lot of interest to try to adapt the questions for the next edition and try to go deeper and understand why this is happening. But that was one of the interesting data points is that when it comes to configuration management, it feels like people are actually using more than the single solution. And if we look with 2016, a lot of information again on this graph, but I'll say the most interesting information for me was still we're seeing a pretty big progression of Ansible from 45 to 60% increase. And we're seeing that Nornir was not even mentioned in 2016 because it didn't exist. So it's really, again, a pretty big achievement for David Barroso and the team behind Nornir on what they've been able to achieve in such a short period of time. Another type of question we asked was, and for me, those 2 questions are very interesting in terms of give us information of what is the level of maturity of what people are doing. The questions were, do you allow configurations to be manually changed on the CLI when you are in these automated environments? And usually what that tells me is, is your source of truth your network or is your source of truth your automated system? Because in the most mature environments, usually don't allow people to manually change the configuration. And the other question was, have you automated the decision to deploy a new configuration? Do you trust your automation system enough so that you will be able to deploy a change based on events, on information without having a human in the loop? And at this last question, it's interesting to see that 45% of the responses and the participants actually have either partially or completely automated the decisions to deploy a new configuration. And if we track the evolution from 2016, we're seeing a pretty big increase. Like this number was significantly lower in 2016. And same for, do you allow the configuration to be manually changed? We're seeing that 14.5% of the participants say no. We cannot make manual changes anymore. And this number again increased from less than 9% in 2016. So it's a good signal that the market is definitely, some of the people who are doing some automations are getting more mature and more advanced in the way they are doing that. Another aspect we wanted to explore is monitoring or anomaly detection, as we put it. It's like, what information or data source are you using to detect problem in your network? And what mechanism are you using to identify problem in your network? So to the first question, the vast majority of responses came up with like we're using SNMP, SCMP ping, and SFlow and NetFlow, and syslog. And I was personally surprised to see that only less than 50% are using something like the flow information and even less are using routing information for active probing. The big surprise for me was to see that less than, or a little over 10%, sorry, are using actually what we call external probing. Like, when we've seen in the last 3 years, Microsoft and Facebook going very strong, talking about their ping mesh and NetNorad, every big players in the space has been talking about those solutions that they build, where they have external probes, measuring the latency and the loss of the network everywhere and the value they're getting from that. We're seeing that it's actually only used by 10% of the participant. And when it comes to signal, we really see, most of the responses or participants are still using, I would say, basic up-down thresholds and alerting. Only 35% are doing some form of correlation on their event, which is a good numbers, but and less than 10% are actually doing more advanced correlations or using machine learning or things like that. So what personally it tells me, and I really, that's something that it confirms what I'm seeing every day, is that I feel like there's really a disconnect when it comes to telemetry and analytics, where when I talk to my former colleagues or peers that are working in the Valley in some of the cloud company, they're all investing massively in building advanced monitoring and telemetry and analytics solutions. And when we think of the keynote here from Bikash, it was very clear that if you want to build a really advanced platform, you need that. You need that to close the loop. Like, none of the architectures that were presented yesterday actually can work without that. And yet, it feels like there's a lot of enterprise out there that still don't see that. And personally, in my day-to-day, I clearly see that there's a lack of awareness on that. So I personally will put a bet is like, for me, that's the next big things. And it really feels like I've been in the network industry, I was telling you, for many years. And 3-4 years ago, we were there when we were talking about automation. The big guys were all about automation, and on the enterprise, we were just starting to even think about it. That was not even something we were talking about. And today, everybody is talking about it. And it feels to me like that's exactly where we are right now with telemetry and analytics. Now that we have, addressed the basics, that's what we're going to have to start on next. And the last question we asked in this section was more, what languages are you using? Programmatic language. And here I will say not a lot of surprise, but 95% of the participants are actually using Python, and where we will have expected, for example, more responses for other systems like Go. It turned out that most of the industry is still focusing on Python right now. So the next section, as mentioned, was about how did you transition to network automation? And I really like these sections for multiple reasons. First, because it brings a lot of very interesting information, but also because these sections actually came out of the community. We didn't have these sections in 2016, and it actually started from a conversation on Twitter. Somebody was like, I wish I had the information and I could tell how long it takes to actually learn automation. And then a few people got together and somebody threw the idea, like, why don't we put that into the Netdevops survey? And somebody put a proposal down, we discussed it, and we at the end included that in these editions, and we turned out with 5 questions. The first 2 questions are really about the team. For how long have you been leveraging automation? And what action did your team take to transition to network automation? And so those 2 questions, the first one is interesting to see that 37% of the participants just got started. They've been doing automation in a significant way for less than a year. So it really tells us, we're still on a very early days. There's a lot of newcomers. And and then we have another 29% that actually have been doing it for less than 2 years. So all in all, we're talking about 65% of the market has been doing it for less than 2 years. So very interesting, metrics to track over the years to understand how things are evolving. And then, what action did you took? I was personally a little bit disappointed to see that still it's a lot about people have to learn on their own, and some did some like 45% actually doing some training, but less than 20% actually are considering hiring dedicated network automation engineers, and less than 10% are doing considering engaging a consulting firm. So I'm biased. Like, I work for a consulting firm, and I used to be the guy hired as a network automation engineer. But in my experience, bringing external expertise that will, from day one, know what needs to be done has been the most successful strategy when it comes to automation. And I understand I'm not the most objective here, but really, for me, it's really a signals that there is a lack of strategy right now in the enterprise, that everybody wants to do automation, but they don't really want to invest. All they're thinking is like, I just got to send my guys in training, or just has them to learn Python and things will be done. And in my experience, that's not the most successful strategy, and it's interesting to see those numbers to me. The other part of this section was, in terms of personal transition, how long did it take to make the transition? You know, how many hours did you put in training and self-learning, and how did you manage to find time for that? And here, we're seeing that we have, you know, overall 80% of the participants managed to do the transition in less than 2 years. I think it's pretty good, and 35% actually of the participants did it in less than 1 year. I think it's very encouraging for all the people out there, you know, that want to understand how long it will take. And when we look at the actual number of hours, you know, less than 80% or 80% overall did the transition by investing less than 1,000 hours. And 25% actually said they were able to make the transition in less than 200 hours, which was very surprising to me. But again, 1,000 hours, you know, to make this kind of transition, I think it's less than what most people will expect. And when it comes to how did you manage to find the time and how do you manage to transition, then again, you know, a majority, more than 50%, had to spend their own time and learn on their own. 30% mentioned that, you know, they managed to actually get some time from dedicated for at work to do that, which for me was actually a good surprise. I was somehow a little bit negative here. I was expecting less than that. And then, you know, there's also some formal training and transition to the new job. So again, that was a very interesting section. So I'm looking forward to see how those numbers evolve years over years. To close on the survey, we had this section that I really liked, which was really about what is trending, what do you have in mind? And so the idea is that we wanted to put a lot of topic to understand how hot they are or not. Like, you know, everybody hear about infrastructure as code, like, and the question was, are you in production? Are you evaluating? Are you thinking about it? Do you have no plan for it, or you don't even know what I'm talking about, just to understand what people have in mind. And so we did two parts of it. We did one part on topic, which was about, you know, DevOps and source of truth, infrastructure as code and shutoffs, and another part on tools that I'll show later. I'll let you analyze all those results, but just quickly for me, what's surprising is, you know, first see that there's a lot of topic like infrastructure as code and source of truth that are getting like more than 90% of the participants are actually actively thinking about it, if not already in production. I was a little surprised to see that shutoffs is only mentioned by 50% as something they actually think about, because we've seen a lot of successes in this space in the server world, and we're starting to see a lot of successes in the network automation world. And I know Jonah, who's speaking after me, is gonna talk about that. So that was, you know, some of the interesting results. As network to code, we really believe as a source of truth is one of the main elements of an automation strategy. So it was really good to see that, again, almost everybody is thinking about it, and there's already more than 30% of the participants that actually are in production with that. And when it comes to tooling, again, we listed a lot of tools like from Ansible, Git, you know, SoulStack, Puppet, Nornir. And here for me, the one I like is I'll pick Nornir and network verification software, which is kind of the bottom, which really translates into Badfish and forward networks, which is the main solution I think that people are thinking about. It's interesting to see how those solutions have low deployment in productions, but a very, very high, you know, number of interest compared to that. Like, it's really disproportional compared to the other solution, which really makes me like those two solutions will probably make a lot of noise in the next year or so. I actually picked a few more outliners, like again, infrastructure code and Napalm. We definitely saw, if we compare with 2019 at the top and 2016 at the bottom here, we definitely a pretty big increase in terms of deployment in productions and level of awareness. And if we look at the outliners on the other side, the one that are like not that haven't performed that well, we definitely saw a complete crush on Puppet and Chef. They almost disappeared. If you remember, everybody was talking about that 4 years ago. Like, they were barely visible in the result this year. So it really tells like nobody is really focusing on that anymore. And I was personally very surprised to see that event-driven automation is a topic that gets a lot of attention. A lot of people feels interested, but the actual number of deployment has barely increased between 16 and 19. And I can't really tell. I will guess it's probably because we still have a lot of newcomers, and it's this kind of use cases actually requires to have more of an advanced use case and environment platforms. But that was really kind of a surprise for me. I will have expected more people to actually have cross the line into the event-driven automation. That was all for the survey. Again, more informations, more graphs, more results, everything is available online. So just to close on this presentation, I wanted to give you more information about the project itself. As I mentioned, it's an open source project, so if you want to join the discussions, everything is on GitHub. And you can also join us on Network to Code Slack channels, where we have a dedicated channel for that. If you go on GitHub, you will be able to find all the results in many different ways. You will be able to find all the graphs that I've been using here and more. There's 150 or 200 graphs that we've been pre-generating for all the results over the year. We have the format that is available in SQL formats. We have the formats in pure text formats if you want to create your own database. And I'm very excited to see what the community will be able to do with that. The first day when we actually put the result out there, it was very exciting to see that someone just took the database and used its own SQL engine and were able to start to slice and dice the data in his own way. He wanted to understand, for example, how one specific question was different for vendor A and vendor B, and that's the kind of things we can do because all the data is available and we have all the database. In terms of the project itself, the way it works is we've been running the survey and open for responses usually around October, meaning we actually spent some time a couple months before October, September to really work on the questionnaire, one on the question, and then once we collected all the response, there's usually a time where we need to do some cleanup, make sure everything was great, and then we publish the results. So if you want to get involved, we definitely welcome feedback and suggestions for new questions anytime, but don't be surprised if there's not a lot of discussion at first. Like most of the discussion usually happen around the time of August and September. So please, go on GitHub, open a PR if you want to ask a questions, if you want to add more options in the questions, if you want to suggest a new question, if you want to suggest a new sections. I'm not saying that everything will be accepted, but we will very much welcome the discussion. And to close, if you're wondering how you can help, really, I think at this point what we need is, we need help to spread the word, spread the word. Really what we've been missing is the ability to reach more people. I think what we have right now is great, but if we could have 3 times the number of responses, it will be even better. We will be able to have way more information and explore that in many more dimensions. So please, spread the word, talk about it to your peer. When you see it, next time in October, you'll spend some time to provide your own feedback, provide your own responses, and send that to your peer. If you're working for a vendor, please reach out to your marketing department to ask them how they could help us, promote to your own user base. And of course, we're always looking for feedback and suggestions on how to make that better. Thanks for your time. Thanks for NANOG for inviting me and giving us the opportunity to actually, not inviting me, but for accepting my proposition, and for giving me the opportunity to actually, again, raise the awareness and share those results with you. Thanks, everyone.